Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the best podcast on the Padres from the Locked On Podcast Network, obviously. I am your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can find me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres for exclusively Padres tweets, or Locked On Padres on YouTube. Going to be doing more live shows on there, especially when the Cy Young announcements come out, potentially when the new manager's finally announced. So look forward to that, and you can maybe send some questions live on the show. Go check us out on SiriusXM. You know the deal. And today's episode, no cold open, because quite frankly, you don't need a cold open for the guest that I have on today's podcast. Here we go. I've done this many times, but I'm going to get it right this time. The co-founder of JustBaseball.com, host of The Call Up, co-host of the Just Baseball Show, occasional writer for The Boardroom. That last part was funny. But seriously, guys, everybody, I'm happy to once again have on my show the prospect guru, the sage of the minor league baseball six paths. It is Mr. Aram Leighton. Sir, how are you?
Doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's well-timed. We are in the team top prospect time of the year in the offseason, and we're banging out the NL West. So one of the first farm systems we wrote up was the Padres, and surprise, surprise, Preller is loading it up a little bit again. There's some good young talent here, and I'm glad we lined up right now, man, because I was just out in Arizona, got to see some of these guys in the fall league, and we just put this list out. So very fresh on my mind, and always excited to talk Padres prospects, even after Preller depletes a little bit. There's just always intrigue here because of how well they draft.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. I literally think since like 2019, 2020, like always these updates and getting excited about the system. And it's just so funny how the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs because of the trades they've made. That it was, I remember Mackenzie Gore was the thing. I remember heck, Robert Hassel was the thing. Like all of these different like Luis Campusano was the thing, right? Like, and now it's just a whole crop of new guys. And you obviously, I haven't been paying attention as much to my podcast, but listeners and viewers would know it's become the Preller hate show on here lately. Like it has not been very good. But one of the things about him is that like I still feel like we're in a better position than so many other teams. And a big reason for that, aside from the money, is that, God dang it, every single time they make a trade, I hear about you text me like, yo, James Wood might be really good. And then the next one is Robby Snelling might be really good just over the years. And it's just so exciting that they're able to replenish so quickly. And I know that you said you got to see some guys in person, which is even more exciting. But before we like get into the specifics, is this the most excited you've been about the Padres farm since maybe back in that like 2019 era when it was called like the best farm in history or whatever? Is this the most excited you've been?
Yeah, I would say so. Kind of since that Soto's trade, especially, it took a little bit of time to load up. And if you look at it through this lens, right, you can't really load a system up with high-end talent that quickly unless you either draft really well, sell, which trading prospects away, which is not what they do, or, have a bunch of guys make a big leap. They did a little bit of drafting really well and a little bit of guys making leaps. Of course, you nail a first-round pick with Snelling, and he's became Just Baseball's minor league pitcher of the year. That helps a lot. But I think also what they've been able to do, and of course, paying Ethan Salas more than anybody else is always going to help too. That helps your top end. But the guys we're going to talk about here, some of them are 8th, 12th round picks that just came out swinging or came out throwing really well. And I think that's been a huge part of it. Is I think we're going to see a lot of the industry come around to some of these players that we're going to discuss, like a Graham Pauley or even a Jacob Marcy, who may not be top 100 prospects in the eyes of a lot of people. I think Pauley's right there, but those guys may end up debuting and helping this team before they even get the prospect shine that they deserve. So I would say with the way that some of these guys have made leaps this year in the recent drafting, I'd say this is as excited I've been about this system in quite some time.
Yeah, I like what you said about top heavy too, because that's what, and don't get me wrong, I'll take that. Like if you're a Padres fan, and I think you'll still take like, I'd rather have like, not rather, but if you have to have like a bunch of lower tier guys, that might be something versus like a couple of super good ones, I think that a lot of fans would be like, oh, cool. Like, I'm okay with that, especially given how many trades they've made. But it seems like that's the vibe I've been getting. And that's the vibe that I got from the article that everybody should check out. Will be embedded in the podcast description as well. The top 15 prospects for the Padres. But I want to talk about those top heavy guys. And first, I want to mention on the top 100 for justbaseball.com, which everyone should check out. You could like sort it by like leagues and players and all that stuff. It's really cool. But for people to have some background in terms of the top guys, according to justbaseball.com and Mr. Aram Leighton, the guru, Jackson Merrill is number 11, Ethan Salas, number 25, the freak, Robby Snelling at number 32, Dylan Lesko at number 69, Dylan Head at number 85, and Jairo Iriarte, I believe is how I say his name. Hopefully I got that right. At number that I already said, what is it here? 87.
87. Yeah.
87. So first of all, really exciting stuff. Again, I cannot emphasize enough. And everybody go check out the article. If you're a big nerd, trust me. Like I'm reading about who was the one that I read about that I thought was interesting. I was curious about Bubba Chandler, just because of the name. And then I started reading. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. You know what I mean? Like I love that.
That's the thing. You're interested in the name, then you find out that he was drafted as a two-way player who was also committed to Clemson as a quarterback. And it's like that's why it's so cool. Just even if you're not a huge prospect head, to just kind of gloss through the top 100 list and just see some of these guys' backgrounds, but also, we detailed the Padres system as well. And that's always a lot of fun too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, it's not mutually exclusive to be a big like prospect fan and also be like, well, I'm not saying I want to have these guys over some major league talent and signing some guys, right? Like, I think that's a mistake people make, but I want to start off with the obvious. Jackson Merrill. We've heard about him for a while, and it's so funny how it started off being like, why are they drafting don't we have like 7 shortstopps? And then he rises through the ranks. I remember you texting me being like, this guy's better than Hassel. This guy's going to rise. Hassel, maybe not Wood, but he's going to rise. I remember you saying that a while ago. And he has number 11 prospect for Just Baseball. Some people around the industry have this guy as like a top 8 or so sort of prospect, which I've seen before, but he's the most important, not just because he's the number 1, but I believe it was back in August. We got reports that the Padres were interested in potentially bringing him up to play center field. Now that worries me for a couple of reasons. Number 1, that wasn't the position I was told he played. Number 2, number 2 is just the tendency of the Padres to have a really exciting guy, but then bring him up immediately when maybe they're not ready just yet. But heck, if it might happen, we've got Trent Grisham in center field right now. This is going to be a storyline to see if they decide to bring him up for the opening day roster. Do you think he's this guy who's potentially ready for next year? And if he is or isn't, what do you think we could potentially see in his rookie season? What kind of player, what kind of things he's good at, et cetera, et cetera?
Dude, it's a great question because this is a conversation that, on a larger scale, I'm eager to have on the call up, which is, what is the new ready for a prospect? Because what we're seeing on the big stage, a lot of the things that we thought we needed to see before a guy debuts, we maybe didn't. Look at Evan Carter. I think Evan Carter and Jackson Merrill are cut from a similar cloth in terms of the type of player that they can be. Carter a little bit more selective at the plate, which obviously translates better to an aggressive assignment, but generally speaking, they're pretty similar. When Evan Carter got promoted, I'm like, whoa, this kind of reeks of some desperation. Well, and that's a guy I love. He's been a top 10 prospect for me for a long time, but I just thought, that's a big leap. And boom, he does what he does. Jordan Waller, on the other hand, I'm like, that's aggressive, but we'll see what he can do. He looked overmatched. So it's a very case-by-case thing. You got to approach it very holistically. But I would say Merrill can definitely inject some life into this team, and I think elongate the lineup a little bit because you look at what you're getting from a Grisham or some of the other guys that were in the bottom of the lineup, or Carpenter who had to play way too much. Merrill, even if he's not tapping into all of his potential, which I still think he's cut from the Christian Yelich cloth, which is he probably won't reach his ceiling or show us kind of what he is fully capable of until maybe year 3 or 4, because he's so polished with the bat in terms of making contact. He's such a well-rounded player that you can justify bringing him up and he could be a solid player, but he might not turn into the above average power guy and the feared middle of the order kind of bat that he can be, maybe until year 3, 4 in the big leagues, which is fine. But I think Merrill, with his feel to hit, with just the way he approaches the game, and sneaky power that I think he's going to tap into even more next year. He's a 6'3" guy that's still adding strength. I think he'd be a really solid player for you. And I think it might make sense to put him in left. We saw him start to get more reps in left at the end of the year. And I think that's important. They could also put him at second. Again, it depends on what they do with Ha-Seong Kim and things like that. But assuming you keep Kim, I saw Merrill start to get some reps in left. I think center field is really tough because that's just a position he hasn't played, commanding the outfield like that. And now they've got some guys that we'll talk about, like Jacob Marcy emerging, who could potentially anchor that spot. I love the idea of Merrill being this guy that could fill in left. You know, if you want to get Xander off his feet for a day, can play a game at short. I love the glove. Can play a game at second. Maybe you end up moving Kim to short when you want to get Xander off his feet a little bit. Or whatever the rotation may be. Manny, we know he's been dealing with a little bit of issues with the wrist, right, or the hand. They can rotate a little bit, and he's versatile. But to answer your question, I think decent batting average, maybe a little bit too aggressive at times, and that can be frustrating. But I think he'll be a guy that could be a great bottom of the order hitter through his first year if they want to be aggressive with him.
Yeah, and I think for me, what's going to be the most interesting thing is assuming the report about them wanting to put him in center field is true, because left field, we have a guy named Juan Soto as of right now. So I would assume that if they called him up, that's probably where he would be playing potentially, because this is just what the Padres keep doing. Do you think he could at least be okay defensively? Because what I don't want is say, you know, I mean, it's like the what is it, the light road path meme and the dark road path meme. I don't want a situation where even if his bat is great, he's Jordan Walker of the Cardinals.
Yes, no, that's a great example.
Really struggled in the outfield, like defensively, but was an awesome bat. And I think people forget a little bit, especially for a rookie. But he struggled in the outfield. Do you think that there's that downside if he went to center field, which could become a problem?
I do. I think center field's a lot. And I mentioned left just because, you know, that just seems to make the most sense in terms of what's easily, you know, I think a place that you can kind of translate to. Center field is, especially when you haven't gotten the reps, is a different beast. Do I think he could get acclimated out there? Potentially. And he works really hard, and he's worked really hard at his shortstop defense to get better there and saw gains, and he moves pretty well. And I think he can become a good center fielder, but this should have been something that we were working on, you know, a couple months left in last season. And again, they started to play him in left, but the reads in left are so different than center. Having a ball coming straight at you in the center field versus, you know, hooked at you in left, guys talk about all the time. Certain players are way more comfortable in center than they are in left. Some are way more comfortable in left than they are in center. I can tell you Merrill's going to be more comfortable where he's actually played. I think there's a world where he can become a pretty good center fielder, but he also still needs to learn how to hit at the big league level. He still needs to cut down on his 30% chase rate. I think that it's just putting too much on his plate to do that. I really do. I'd rather see what Jacob Marcy can do out there, who has hit at the upper levels a little bit more, who, you know, is performing in the fall league and who's a great defender in center field. Is there a way you can rotate, like who's clogging up the DH spot? Couldn't Soto DH and you put Merrill in left?
I mean, that would be fun. I'd be intrigued by it. Obviously, it would depend on if they get any new batters, if they bring in your former boy Garrett Cooper again or something like that. Like maybe that's what they end up doing. But Soto as DH would be pretty cool. I would worry about the behind the scenes potential politics of like this guy who's about to be a free agent.
That's the problem.
You know what I mean? So that's
right. You're hitting free agency. No one wants to. Scott Boras is not going to be happy about him DHing. Yeah. And I think that's definitely
he shouldn't be. That's totally his prerogative, and he shouldn't be. It's an agent, guys. I don't know why people hate this guy. He should get his players paid.
Yeah, he's doing what he's supposed to do. It's just the way he does it.
I know. Although I don't care. I like some of the quotes. I don't care.
No, we just talked about it in the Just Baseball show. Like so corny, so dad jokey, but like every once in a while he mixes one in. You're like, that was pretty clever.
Yeah, right.
So I think so with Machado though. What's his situation? Because he has the right elbow extensor tendon repair surgery. Is he going to have to DH?
Man, welcome to the Padres world right now, man. There are so many questions.
Here, you put Kim at third, Merrill at second. That's a really good defensive infield. I know Bogarts isn't the best, but he actually played fine
He's okay.
defensively last year.
He's okay. Yeah.
I would love that infield.
Mhm.
So maybe that's the way that they do it. And I know Machado's great, but you get him time to kind of get going there.
Mhm.
Then if Merrill is swinging it and looks comfortable, then you can maybe get used to getting him more reps in the outfield. You can do that,
Mhm.
in between games, before games, get him more of those reps out there, live reads and batting practice, whatever it may be. But I just think it would be a negative to his development at 20 years old to put him in center field. I
Mhm.
just think that, and also you're giving up a lot of value out there because, again, I think Marcy can play a better center field. I think Grisham, even then, like,
Yeah.
Merrill's going
He
to have
still can.
some growing pains, right? And it's not guaranteed that he's going to hit better than Grisham right away. And if he's not, then it's almost twofold, because at
Mhm.
least Grisham can go get it out there,
Mhm.
and that's the difference. So I wouldn't do it. The furthest I'd go is left. You have the Soto situation. I think the most sense is second base, while Machado kind of heals up and then go from there.
Yeah. I could see that potentially happening where maybe he's an early guy that gets sent back down, unless he's off to a blistering start and he just lights the league on fire. That's totally true. And also, I think that the Cronenworth piece of this is important too. It
Yeah.
seems like there's a vibe of let's try and get his value back by putting him as a utility infielder again. So a lot of
Well,
weird clog there. And then also, I would
and
warn
he,
Padres fans, or go ahead.
I was just gonna say, he also played a little first. I can almost see him taking that Cronenworth role,
Mhm.
if that makes
I
sense.
I would not mind it. I would not mind it. The only thing that I'll tell Padres fans is they might be thinking right now, well, look at how easily Tatis transferred to the outfield. And I would be very cautious in
Yeah.
assuming that you can strike lightning twice, because we did that with CJ Abrams. You assumed he was going to be awesome immediately, then you traded him and it's taken him some time. So
Yeah.
I would be very careful with that, with assuming things are going to go right. And Lord knows the Padres haven't showed a lot of patience. So that's not what I would do. But before we get into, there's actually more prospects, guys, that we have
Yeah.
to talk about, although this was a lot of fun. Really quickly, guys, we need to take a second to talk about one of our sponsors today. And that is, look, I love talking prospects, love talking baseball and stuff. But just to be a little bit serious real quick, I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply of ED medications and much more as well, thanks to our friends over at Jace Medical, ladies and gentlemen. And look, you got a worldwide, issues going on. You've got pandemics that happened. It's crazy out here. But with them, it's kind of helpful, especially if you're traveling internationally, to have this sort of kit. It's not a kit. It's the Jace. What the heck do they call it? The Jace case. There we go. It rhymes. The Jace case. It provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is to fill out a simple online form and, in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of Jace's board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from their physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended, and it's customizable. It's not just 5, the end. They have all sorts of different ones, and they're adding more as time goes on. And because you're listening to this podcast, you know me, I always hook you guys up with a little bit of deal. Go to jacemedical.com to see what's offered for you and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Remember, that's promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase over at Jace Medical. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. We've been talking big about Jackson Merrill, so we're not going to do any more on that, although that was a lot of fun. And I really do think one of the big questions for this offseason that will dictate free agency and all sorts of things and trade rumors, definitely whole cluster of things there. But I want to quickly talk about apparently the Bryce Harper of catchers. And I say that because I remember being someone who doesn't follow prospects, especially back then, being like, the chosen one. He's 16 getting drafted. What the heck? And what I mean by that about Ethan Salas is not necessarily what he is as a player. It's not necessarily the same skill set or anything like that. But 17 years old and he's getting promoted. And there are some people who have this guy as a top 10 prospect. Just baseball and yourself. Should I say just baseball or you have him?
I always say just baseball, but
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering. Have him at 25, which is still very high for a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
I cannot get over that at the catcher position. Can you just talk about, and did you get to see him play? Just go ahead and cook.
I mean, dude, he's absurd, and probably one of the harder guys to rank. I think you could justify putting him way higher. You could justify, really having him anywhere. It's just 25 was where he settled for us, just because I wasn't able to see too much, because
Mhm.
it was amazing what he was able to do at low A, and I would have loved to have just seen him have the entire season there. Then they bring him up to high A, and I thought that was okay. Maybe Fort Wayne's a better situation for him. It's a better environment, better coaching staff, blah blah blah. And then they bring him up to double A, and maybe that was to work more
Yeah.
with the Robby Snellings of the world and the Adam Mazers, and just again have that more advanced coaching. But at that point, how am I supposed to analyze a guy already in double A there? Forget the age. That amount of professional at bats to get straight to double A, and even 20-year-olds out of college aren't performing like that well in that situation. Very few are. So it was hard to judge him from that perspective. But from what I was able to see from a swing mechanics standpoint, from the way that he's able to catch, he has all the tools to be, I think, eventually the top prospect in the game if he's around long enough before they inevitably call him up very early. But it's potentially a plus feel to hit, maybe beyond that, above average power. The blocking needs a little work. He's 17 and he's barely blocked and received
Mhm.
professional stuff, and
Mhm.
let alone upper minor stuff. But the arm is good, and I think this is a really well-rounded catcher. And like I said, he's like a wonderkin. It's amazing. With a decent start to the year in Double A, he's
Yeah.
probably instantly a top 10 prospect in the game. Again, he was just one of those guys that was really hard to peg in a certain
Yeah.
spot.
Especially since, hey, I mean, there are people who have succeeded at a minor league level early, and then it filters out and it goes downwards. I mean, I keep bringing up Robert Hassel, but I just think that he's one that's more central to Padres fans, that they'll get it because
Yeah,
he was like top 10,
that
15, and
was it.
now he's like in the 80s, 70s now. So things can change really quickly. And like you said, he's 17. It's almost like when people critique like Wembanyama for the
Yeah.
NBA, where I'm like, he's 19. Did I do that for just to put it out there potentially for engagement to compare Ethan Salas to Victor Wembanyama? Maybe. I'm not going to admit guilt to those charges if they're ever brought up. But yeah, man, he's super exciting. But those are the two core guys. And I think while Salas is, I mean, we joke about it, but I think even him would be way too much of a ridiculous, very Padres type of move for me to believe it. I think they're going to still give Luis Campusano more time. And it's a great problem to have. If for some reason you have these two freak catching prospects, great. I love that. I like a surplus of stuff. It's
Yeah.
baseball. That's awesome. You don't have to just set every position. The end. Now, though, we get into the nitty gritty, and that is the rest of the top 15 of the Padres farm system and whatnot. And there's all sorts of guys. But I'm wondering, who do you think, let's start off with this, are some guys that you think are most likely to join the team early or could make an impact earlier? And I don't even mean necessarily like next year, but just the earliest timetable, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, earliest timetable, I think, would be potentially Jacob Marcy,
Mhm.
because Marcy, who I think checked in around the 9 or 10 spot on the top prospect list here. Um,
He's 9,
he's
yeah.
just so polished. Number 9, plus hitter, the
Mhm.
power. And there's a guy I got to see up close and personal in the fall league. And I think there's a reason why they sent him to the fall league is, he might be under consideration to try to break into the, maybe if he doesn't even break camp, get onto the team in an early point and get promoted. But just such a polished game, plays really hard, steals bags, above average runner, good defense in center. And again, makes a lot of contact and is extremely patient. So even if he's only going to hit 10, 15 home runs, I feel like that's a guy that will get acclimated to the big leagues pretty quickly. And we talk about the frustration with Grisham and everything. Marcy to
Mhm.
me feels like a high floor option to play center field because you get the good glove, because you get the stolen base ability, because even if he's not hitting, he walks a ton. He doesn't, I think it's a sub 20% chase rate. That's a guy that I think could break in really, really early. But also, I think Graham Pauley's a name to watch. And Pauley, it's kind of depend on what they decide to do with Merrill and everything. But
Mhm.
Pauley, 13th round pick in 2022.
Pauley. Yeah.
I'm so impressed with this guy. Probably one of my favorite swings I saw out in the AFL. Just impressive power, good feel to hit. Plays a good third, but they also were giving him some action in left. He's a little shaky out there, but getting the reps. He got plenty at the end of the year and is getting more in the fall league. That's another guy that can swing it. And then an arm I wouldn't sleep on is potentially Robby Snelling getting up there, because
Mhm,
I thought that they pushed him pretty hard this year in terms of his innings. He
mhm,
threw, what was it, 120 something, I think, innings this year. And this was really his first full season after being a first round pick in 2022 out of high school. So for Snelling, I think that's a guy that could get up pretty quickly because of the workload, because of the command. I mean, it's a 93 to 94 mile an hour fastball with good shape. It's an elite changeup, a good curveball. Or I think you look at that pitch mix with the good command. This is a guy that should be able to hop into the rotation and at least give you some serviceable starts if they need it. So I
mhm,
think that's a guy I could see them being aggressive with, especially with teams just not wanting to waste bullets with their young arms anymore in the minor leagues if they look ready. And Snelling
mm,
looks like he
gotcha.
could be ready. I'm not saying right away, but he makes 5-8 starts in Double-A. What's the point of setting him to the PCL? We saw so many
Mhm,
pitchers last year get promoted straight from double when they looked ready.
mhm. Absolutely. For the record, 103 and two-thirds innings, it looks like,
103.
according to Baseball Reference, that he threw last year. Um, that's really, really fascinating. And I think that Snelling, I was about to ask you about him next, just because I think, well, yeah, those other guys are fascinating. Snelling, and I'll ask you about Dylan Lesko in a second. Just the Padres probably losing. Who's going to end up being the Cy Young winner of the National League this year? So you take that into account, and maybe you take into account, are they going to be able to keep both Lugo and Waka? I personally think it's going to be one of the two. I don't know which one yet. I believe it is Waka that has the club option, if I'm not mistaken. And I imagine we'll see what happens with Lugo and whatnot. But I think that we'll see, because Padres pitching has been the weird thing for ages. I've talked to people who said that they always target Padres minor league pitching, because they're like, we know that they don't know how to develop them over there, and we'll make them better over here. And unfortunately, that has lived up to it. I mean, the Mackenzie Gore saga was a whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, just nonstop. And you could even point to, say, some international signings like Adrian Morejon, who didn't pan out all that well for the team, despite the really high velocity fastball and such. So
How
Padres
about Ryan
pitching
Weathers?
is a little weird. Hmm?
How about
Oh,
Ryan
Ryan
Weathers?
Weathers, now on your team. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now on
Yeah.
your team. I can't wait for him to win the Cy Young next year. So that should be like, I think that's the hard part. So it's
Yeah.
like, if I wasn't getting excited about these guys, I'm just a little skeptical. Now, can Ruben Yeaple at the major league level help out? Sure. Because ever since he's come along, a lot of the starting pitchers have gotten better, but still, farm system stuff is a little bit different sometimes, I think.
Well,
But can you talk a little bit about Dylan Lesko as well, in
yeah.
terms of just
So
the top pitchers?
no doubt. And I'll hit on Lesko. And then I want to say there's probably like a 3-man race of Double-A arms that
Mhm,
maybe they'll have the choice of the most ready one to roll with. And there's two other names I'll hit on there. But when it comes to Lesko, like, that's the project, right? And everything that you just alluded to, like, this is going to be the challenge. Can they develop this guy? The good news is he's extremely talented. He was the top prep arm in the class. It just, the only reason he didn't go top 5 or top 10 was because he underwent Tommy John surgery ahead of the draft and fell, quote unquote, to the 15th overall pick. But this guy, the fastball is crazy. He gets 20 to 22 inches of induced vertical break, which is well above big league average, which is kind of that carry that you want to see on the fastball. And then he's known for his just diabolical changeup. Like, it is
mm, mm,
wipeout plus pitch. It's almost a screwball. It's Devin Williams-esque in terms of the shape. The command isn't the same, so that's something he has to work on. And then the big sticking point with Lesko, and it's just kind of what he needs to develop here, is you have pitchers, usually they're either pronators, which is, your hand going the other way, which is like the changeups, or they're supinators, which is the ability to kind of spin a breaking ball. Some guys can do both
okay.
really well, but most guys have the one way that they do it better. And for him, he's more of a pronator. So he struggles
Okay.
to consistently command the breaking ball. But the good news is he rips them off well. It's a slow
Hmm.
curveball, but 3,000 RPMs. I mean, that's RPM. That's like top of the line, but
Hmm.
struggles to land it for a strike. It's a little big. I think that's where the Padres need to get with him and say, let's throw a harder slider, or let's change the shape of this a little bit, because the fastball and changeup are great. The command's a work in progress, but he's coming off a TJ. That's very common for young arms to, take some time to find the slot
Yeah.
again and everything. And he got better and better as the year went on. But the big thing for him is, can he find that breaking ball, whether it's adjusting the one he has or finding a better feel for it? I think he needs to adjust it. From that point on, it's game over because the fastball is plus, changeup's plus, and he's a big dude.
Big dude. I love big dudes, especially for pitchers. Want to have like a real video game final boss on the mound. You know what I mean? I want you as big and
That could be
humongous
him.
as possible. Could be him. That's exciting. I do want to ask about two other guys before we asked about just some other names to look out for, including one that I may or may not have read about, I think 2 days ago when I first asked you to be on this podcast. It's a guy with a cool name. Shocker. But I want to ask about Samuel Zavala.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I don't know. I just, and it's not just you. I feel like I've heard a couple mixed things on him. And again, I alluded to this before about the international free agent thing. Hasn't always been, at least as of lately, something that Preller has succeeded at, despite spending a lot of money in that direction. Mm-hmm. What's kind of the general vibe, do you think, for Samuel Zavala?
Yeah, he's polarizing because I think that the surface level stats at the lower levels were good up until he got to high A. But the underlying data is concerning. And I look at the swing. There's a lot of swing and miss. I still think that he's a good prospect. He checks in at number 10. But there were some that had him as a top 100 guy. And I think that's more scouting the stat line than the swing and the underlying metrics, because I'm a little concerned at like what is his profile going to be, because there's swing and miss, but the exit velocities are kind of fringy. So it's like, okay, if swing and miss is palatable if you got big power, right? If you're James Wood and you hit the ball 112, I can pallet the swing and miss, or vice versa. If you are very contact oriented and don't have a lot of power, I can pallet it because you make a lot of contact. He doesn't really fit into either bucket. It's below average contact rates and it's below average, power output right now. He's not the best runner. So he's just kind of a tweener. Could he grow into more power? Potentially, but that's what he's going to need to do. So instead of maybe trying to focus on being agile to stick in center, maybe put on 15, 20 pounds and lean into being a power bat. He is a patient hitter, which really helps. He walks a lot. I think that's why he's been able to put up good numbers at the lower levels, but he's going to need to either make a big jump with the hit tool, which is really hard to do, or make a big jump in the power department, which I think he can do, and just lean into being more of a corner masher. But right now it's just too much of a tweener profile.
Totally fair. Hey, again, I love asking you these questions because it's just weird. I just feel like it's all over the place with this guy. Regardless, though, still young, so things can change, obviously, over time. Don't want to freak people out. Another young guy I want to talk about is Homer Bush.
I knew that was going to be the name.
Yeah. Yeah. What's going on with Homer Bush? Because, again, every single time I look up, it's like, hey, Javi, man, like, I mean, haha, your Chargers lost to my Dolphins, but also Homer Bush might be pretty good. Tell us about this guy.
Fun player. And got a lot of looks because he played at Grand Canyon University with Jacob Wilson. You have top 10 pick by the Oakland A's, but Bush is fun. Like, he makes a lot of contact. He has the bloodlines as well. His dad was a professional athlete. I think played in the major leagues as well. But what's interesting with him is really good feel to hit. The power is not totally there yet. Like, it's below average power, but he's 6'3", 200. So it's like he could tap into more. Runs really well and a good defender in center field. He hit the ground running professionally. He finished the year in Double-A and was putting up good numbers there too. I think he's a really high floor piece here, where worst case, you got a fourth outfielder. And I think that's another example. Fourth round, they grab him. Just a good get by the Padres here, because I think a lot of teams were put off by the lack of power, especially in a conference where the ball flies. But you see the projection, you see the speed, you see the field to hit, you see the approach, the ability to stick in center field, the bloodlines. And it's like, why wouldn't you take a chance on this guy in the fourth round? And he made a really smooth transition into pro ball. I'm looking at Homer Bush to be maybe the biggest riser in this system this coming season. Yeah,
he's the type of guy that I will be following. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be following to just see like what happens, especially this next year. In general, I'm going to be following all these guys, but him, I'm just really curious about to see how much he rises. I get slight, like that James Wood, no one's talking about him quite enough yet. And all of a sudden he sneaks there. So really excited about him. But to close things out, I want to talk about some potential hidden gems, some potential other guys for people to keep, on their radar. They aren't in the top 15. And the first one I want to talk about is the first one that you mentioned in the article, which again, everyone could go check out the full thing. Lamar King Jr.
What a
I
name,
mean,
right?
come on, man.
That
Come on.
sounds like a beast.
It's
And then
amazing.
you find out his dad was a first round pick edge rusher,
I know.
Lamar King Sr. Yeah, he's a project of all projects, but they drafted
Mhm.
him with that intention. And from what I've been able to see, I think the project is progressing nicely in terms of like he's making those steps forward. He's a catcher with monster power, with a rocket for an arm, and it's going to come down to whether he can hit enough. But I think he's getting there, and they protected him at the complex. 19 years old, give him his time, but it could go one way or another, right? There's some similarities of, like a Josh Mears where it's like, oh my gosh, if
Mhm.
this all works, holy crap.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, it doesn't, but this wasn't a first round pick here. So
Yeah.
I like Lamar King in terms of just where they got him at, the upside, and just the physical being that he is.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. I'm going to be following this guy so intensely. I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating. To talk about some of the other guys that you mentioned, just to quickly mention some other names to watch. You mentioned Isaiah Lowe, right-handed pitcher, Ryan Burgett, right-handed pitcher, Jagger Haynes, left-handed pitcher, and Alec Jacob, a right-handed pitcher. Out of those guys, what do you got on them? Are there these type of guys? Because I remember hearing about who was it that I heard about? Is it Alec Jacob is the one that I heard about more recently than the others? What can you tell us about these guys?
Yeah, Jacobs throws like a weirdo, which is great. You want that like outlier, bizarre release point, and
Mhm.
he's got
That's
that. It's
probably
like
why I heard about him. Yeah.
it's like the Jimmy Herget type, which I think he's going to find a way to just be deceptive out of the pen. And we know that the Tim Hills of the world, stuff like that. Like I think that there's a role for him there. So I think he's a high probability big leaguer. Isaiah Lowe is the polar opposite in a way that I think he could be really good. He then went over slot 11th round to get him in 2022 to forego his commitment to Wake Forest, 400K that they
Mhm.
gave him. And we only saw about 12 innings before he battled, I think, some injuries or some other things.
Mhm.
He is fringy with the command, but the stuff is loud. So
Mhm.
athletic pitcher with loud stuff. Like I'm interested to see how that
Mhm.
develops and how things can go from there. And then one other thing I just wanted to mention with the double A arms, guys that could potentially jump in there next year, like Jairo Iriarte, he's
Mhm.
battling some command issues, but I thought got better as the year went on. Fastball is so good that he can lean on that heavily. It's mid to upper 90s, flat low release point, big swing and miss, nasty slider. That's a guy that could probably fit in the bullpen even if the command isn't great, or they use as like an opener or a guy that can flip the lineup over once or twice. And then I think Adam Mazur is one of the more underrated pitching prospects in the game. I was
Mhm.
really impressed with him the more I got to see from him. Second round pick in 2022, had a lot of success last season, I think finishing up in double A and held his own in double A, dominated high A. Mazur, nothing jumps off the page, but above average fastball, really good command, good slider. Mazur is a guy that could end up anchoring the back end of the rotation too. And he's just kind of long, lanky, and fun. I think that's another guy to look out for to potentially help next year.
Love it, man. You are giving me hope again. I was watching Denelson Lamet highlights. That's how down I've been lately when it comes to Padres stuff. But it's kind of cool that, and for listeners and viewers, like it seems like they have a lot more ammo. And I don't say that to demean or diminish, I should say, these people as human beings and their hopes of making the majors, et cetera, but more rather, hey, I mean, if this Padres team, which is clearly a team that's designed to win now, what if Jackson Merrill or any of these guys become their Evan Carter, even if it's just for a year? Heck, what if these guys become Ryan Weathers his rookie year, even if
Yeah.
it's just for a couple months, where it's like that stuff adds up when you
Mm-hmm.
have injuries, when you have Matt Carpenters who just
Yeah.
stink, right? Like they just completely fall off the plate. Or your, Austin Nolos, who apparently just couldn't see and they didn't know for some reason. Like it's good to have these kind of backup plans that can keep you afloat. Because as everyone remembers in 2021, Vince Velasquez and Jake Arrieta, not who I want to see if I'm trying to make the playoffs at that stage of their careers. So I'm really excited about this farm system. Are there any other last sort of takes you want to fire off?
I think Grand Pauley's special. I just
Hmm.
wanted to lean into that. And I think like after I put this list out before we went out to the fall league and I hadn't seen him in person yet. And Pauley still checked in at 8, which is important to note because the top 6 are top 100 guys. So the only non-top 100 prospect ahead of Grant Pauley was Adam Mazur, who also I just thought was super high floor arm, as I just mentioned. I think if I just after what I saw from Pauley, I'd probably put him over Mazur. And I think Pauley's knocking on the door top 100. It is one of the more connected swings I've seen. He is so advanced at the plate, late bloomer, unbelievable find for the Padres there in the 13th round. I think that this guy is going to be a hitter at the big league level, like a good one. A lot of doubles, mix in 15 to 20 homers. I think the Padres have a really good one here with Grant Pauley. And go look at the numbers this past year if you don't believe me. But the swing mechanics back it up. I'm a huge fan, and I want to call my shot there. I called Davis Schneider on a Blue Jays podcast. I'm going to start to just try to do that when I go on other shows now. I'm calling my Grant Pauley shot. This guy's going to be a dog at the big league level. I think they've got something here.
I love to hear it, Aram, and I love to have you on this podcast. Are there any last things you'd like to plug about the website or about your life? And lastly, you would Thanksgiving or not Thanksgiving. Are you a Christmas music after Halloween guy, or do you wait after Thanksgiving?
No chance. Do not like Christmas music much at all. Unfortunately, I love Christmas, but not Christmas music. Oh, come on, that's not surprising to you. I know you know that.
I know that's what I'm laughing.
It's on brand, but no, I'm not a big Christmas music guy, especially being in New York City. Every freaking store I walk into, but no, the top prospect list across the entire league. We'll be continuing to churn those out. We're doing the NL West right now, so if you want to see kind of what how the farm systems stack up with the rivals, keep an eye out for
Giants,
that. Of course, this Padres system's already out, so check that out. Top 100 is already out, and we're always updating that. And if you enjoy the prospect stuff, check out our prospect podcast, The Call Up. Ironically, we're going to be having Grant Pauley on in the next week or so. After I saw him, I was like, okay, I need to talk to him about a swing. So we're going to have Grant Pauley on in the next week or two. So keep an eye out for that interview. And excited about that.
Love. Aram, always a pleasure. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, just like the rest of you Padres fans. Thank you for once again tuning into the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. That's pretty much it. Check out for next week, going to be doing season reviews for more players. We've got Gary Sanchez up next, St. Gary Sanchez. That should be a lot of fun. I can't wait. We've got him coming up next week. Probably some crossovers, end of season superlatives we're working on. And whenever the heck they finally announce this new manager, and whenever the heck we get more free agency news, of course, we will have it here. But until we get to that point, guys, until next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful. My Friday Faithful homies, take care.